First lesson of Science 30 is about the heart. So some curriculum stuff that you need to know. Describe the principal structures and the associated blood vessels in the heart. So these are all terms you need to know. Ventricle, atria, septum, valves. You don't need to know specific names. Aorta, vena cava, pulmonary arteries, veins, coronary arteries. So those are all terms in the program of studies, which means you need to know that. Another term you need to know, describe the rhythmic contraction of the heart and its function in the general circulation of blood through the pulmonary and systemic pathways. Terms you need to know. Describe the structure and function of blood vessels, of blood through more terms, arteries, arterioles, venules, veins, and capillaries. And map the blood through a mammal's heart. Okay, so we're going to start off with, well, what do you know about the heart? Right? You may know some things, so think about it, right? The heart pumps blood. Good. Maybe it's a muscle. Maybe that's what you were thinking. Right? I don't know. Maybe you know it relies on electrical impulses to make it beat. Something like that. Yeah. So here's a video that shows just a little bit of information about the heart.
For most of history, humans had no idea what purpose the heart served. In fact, the organ so confused Leonardo da Vinci that he gave up studying it. Although everyone could feel their own heart beating, it wasn't always clear what each thump was achieving. Now we know that the heart pumps blood. But that fact wasn't always obvious, because if a heart was exposed or taken out, the body would perish quickly. It's also impossible to see through the blood vessels, and even if that were possible, the blood itself is opaque, making it difficult to see the heart valves working. Even in the 21st century, only a few people in surgery teams have actually seen a working heart. Internet searches for heart function point to crude models, diagrams, or animations that don't really show how it works. It's as if there has been a centuries-old conspiracy amongst teachers and students to accept that heart function cannot be demonstrated, meaning that the next best thing is simply to cut it open and label the parts. That way, students might not fully grasp the way it works, but can superficially understand it, learning such concepts as, the heart is a four-chambered organ, or potentially misleading statements like, mammals have a dual circulation, one with blood going to the lungs and back, and another to the body and back. In reality, mammals have a figure-8 circulation. Blood goes from one heart pump to the lungs, back to the second heart pump, which sends it to the body, and then back to the first pump. That's an important difference because it marks two completely different morphologies. This confusion makes many students wary of the heart in biology lessons, thinking it signals an intimidating subject full of complicated names and diagrams. Only those who end up studying medicine completely understand how it all actually works. That's when its functions become apparent, as medics get to observe the motion of the heart's valves. So let's imagine you're a medic for a day. What you'll need to get started is a whole, fresh heart, like one from a sheep or pig. Immerse this heart in water, and you'll see that it doesn't pump when squeezed by hand. That's because water doesn't enter the heart cleanly enough for the pumping mechanism to work. We can solve this problem in an extraordinarily simple way. Simply identify the two atria and cut them off, trimming them down to the tops of the ventricles. This makes the heart look less complicated, because the atria have several incoming veins attached, so without them there, the only vessels remaining are the two major heart arteries, the aorta and pulmonary artery, which rise like white columns from between the ventricles. It looks, and really is, very simple. If you run water into the right ventricle from a tap, the left also works, but less spectacularly, you'll see that the ventricular valve tries to close against the incoming stream, and the ventricle inflates with water. Squeeze the ventricle, and a stream of water squirts out of the pulmonary artery. The ventricular valves, called the tricuspid in the right ventricle and the mitral in the left, can be seen through the clear water opening and closing like parachutes as the ventricle is rhythmically squeezed. This flow of water mimics the flow of blood in life. The valves are completely efficient. You'll notice they don't leak at all when the ventricles are squeezed. Over time, they also close against each other with very little wear and tear, which explains how this mechanism continues to work seamlessly for more than 2 billion beats a heart gives in its lifetime. Now, anyone studying the heart can hold one in their hands, make it pump for real, and watch the action unfold. So place your hand above your own and feel its rhythmic beat. Understanding how this dependable inner pump works gives new resonance to the feeling you get when you run a race, drink too much caffeine, or catch the eye of the one you love.
So the circulatory system has 4 main roles. One role is to transport gases, nutrients, waste. Body regulation by hormones. So it lets your body know when, fight or flight sort of responses need to happen. It lets you know, hey, your body's pregnant. You need to start doing things that a pregnant body needs to do. Hey, it's puberty. There should be hair where there wasn't hair before. Protection and defense, so we'll talk about this a little bit later, but immunity and injury, how does our body heal? How does it protect if you have a virus or something in you? And our circulatory system also distributes body heat. So blood is part of moving through our body, helps distribute body heat to keep everything a good temperature. So how much blood does your heart pump? So cardiac output is a measure of how much blood your body pumps. So how much blood actually is in the body? Does anyone know? So you have about 5 liters of blood in your body. So it's a little bit more than a milk jug. But your cardiac output is how much blood your body pumps. So your heart beats about 72 beats per minute. Then how many liters of blood does your heart pump every minute? And it tells us that there's 70 milliliters per beat. So if we want to know how much blood our heart pumps per minute, all we have to do is we have to set it up like this. So we have 70 milliliters for every 1 beat. And then we have 72 beats in 1 minute. So the beats, we'll cancel it with the beats. So we have 70, so this is how many milliliters per minute. Right? So if I do that, I'll just open my calculator here and plug that in. So all I need to do is 70 times 72, because there's just ones on the bottom. And I get 5040. And that's milliliters per minute, which means this is about 5 liters. So it's about 5 liters per minute, because 1,000 milliliters in a liter. So you pump about all of your blood every minute, which is impressive. So the heart has 2 sides to it, the left and the right side. So when you're talking about the left and the right side, you have to think about it as your own, or if you're talking about it with yourself. And it's opposite if you're looking at another person. So this is the left side of the screen, but it's actually the right side of the heart. Because if you look down, it's like, okay, that's the right side, but if someone across from me, they wouldn't agree. So this is the left side of the heart, even though it's the right side of the page. Okay, you have to think about it. You have to sort of turn the same way as the heart. So when looking at a picture of a heart, left and right are backwards, and then we have the septum. So the septum is right here. The septum separates the left and the right side of the heart. So the right side of the septum has low oxygen, high CO2, right? So low oxygen, high CO2. And the right side of the heart has a high oxygen, low CO2. So you can have problems with your septum. It's called a septal defect. and that's where it doesn't close completely. It's sometimes called a hole in your heart. Sometimes you hear babies have a hole in the heart. It just means that their septum is open, and this can cause low oxygen and high oxygen to mix, which means your body's not efficient as it needs to be because it's not getting all the oxygen that it needs. So it's wasting some of the high oxygen, and the low oxygen goes with the high oxygen, so you might be tired quite a bit. Okay, so you can see that here's the septum. There's a little opening, so the left and the right side of the heart mix. And if it's bad enough, they would have to do surgery on it. So we need to know blood flow through our heart, so we're going to list that. So remember that this is our right side, and this is our left side. Here's our septum in between. So we're going to start right here. So this is our Vena Cava, okay, and that's the first stop. And this is actually the Vena Cava as well. This is just the superior, and this is the inferior. So both of those are the Vena Cava. And then what it's going to do is it's going to go into this chamber right here. So this is our atrium. And to be more specific, because it's on the right side, we're on the right atrium. So all of this is low oxygen blood. Okay? And after it goes through here, so this is a valve. It's going to go into here. And this is our ventricle. L-E. I had to think of how to spell it. So this is our right ventricle. Okay, and then it goes through this other valve right here. And the last stop right here is our pulmonary artery. Okay. When it goes to the pulmonary artery, it goes to this side, and it goes to this side, and then it comes back. When it comes back, pulmonary means like lungs. So when it comes back, it's coming through the pulmonary vein. Artery is away from the heart. Vein is towards the heart. So this is also a pulmonary vein. Oops. So remember that now, here we're on the left side of the heart. So now we have high oxygen because it went to the lungs, it picked up oxygen, dropped off CO2, and then came back. Okay. And then from this side or this side, it comes into here, which is our atrium. But now we're in our left atrium. It goes through a valve here, and it goes into our ventricle. And this is our left ventricle. It always goes AV, A first, then V. And then its very last stop, it goes through a valve here again. This is our aorta. That's our very last stop, right? So it goes from here, through here, up into our aorta that way. Okay, and that's our very last stop. So you need to memorize that flow of blood through the heart. Okay, that's basically it. You need to know where there's high oxygen, where there's low oxygen. Yeah. So I said that your artery means away from your heart. There's one exception to that, and these are your coronary arteries. So your heart pumps blood away and towards it like that, but your heart is a muscle, and your heart needs a supply of oxygen and nutrients. So what that means is that there needs to be arteries that supply your heart with blood, right? When we're talking about away or towards our heart, we're usually talking about the heart as a pump. But when we're talking about our coronary arteries, they supply the heart with muscle. So coronary arteries would go towards our heart. So here's a heart video. I'll let you watch that.
About the size of your fist, the human heart is the most important muscle in the body. It can beat more than 100,000 times a day, pumping about 2,000 gallons of blood through a 60,000-mile network of vessels in the body. The human heart is made up of 4 major chambers: the right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, and left ventricle. The right side of the heart receives blood that is low in oxygen from veins all over the body. It then pumps the blood through the pulmonary arteries into the lungs where it will become reoxygenated. The left side of the heart receives this oxygen-rich blood from the lungs. Then it pumps the blood through the aorta back out to the rest of the body through a complex network of arteries, arterioles, and capillaries. While blood is circulating through the body, it delivers oxygen and nutrients to tissue through the capillaries, and at the same time picks up carbon dioxide and other waste material. The veins return the deoxygenated blood to the right atrium, and the cycle begins again. The heart has 4 valves. Each valve is like a one-way door that keeps the blood in the heart flowing in the same direction. The valves are made up of 2 or 3 small but strong flaps of tissue called leaflets. Leaflets open to allow blood to flow through the valve and close to prevent blood from flowing backward. The opening and closing of the valves is controlled by blood pressure changes within each heart chamber. The tricuspid valve is positioned in the heart's right side between the right atrium and right ventricle. The pulmonic valve separates the right ventricle from the pulmonary artery. The mitral valve is positioned in the heart's left side between the left atrium and the left ventricle. And the aortic valve separates the left ventricle from the aorta. As blood circulates through the heart, some of the blood flows into a set of much smaller blood vessels that provide blood directly to the heart. These arteries, called coronary arteries, surround or crown the heart. This separate circulatory system, called coronary circulation, keeps the heart nourished and oxygenated. The 2 main branches of the aorta that nourish the heart are the right and left main coronary arteries. Coronary artery disease, which occurs when there is a buildup of cholesterol plaque, affects the arteries of this circulatory system and causes a decrease in blood flow to the heart muscle, resulting in possible damage to the heart or a heart attack. The beating of the heart, which is its rhythm, is regulated by electrical impulses generated by your heart muscle. These impulses begin in the sinoatrial node and cause your heart to contract. Sometimes the sinoatrial node is also referred to as your heart's natural pacemaker, since it keeps the heart rate constant and consistent. The impulses then travel to the atrioventricular node, where the signal is checked and then sent through the ventricles, which causes them to contract. Your heart rate can change based upon external conditions such as diet, exercise, stress, or even hormonal factors.
So one of the other terms you need to know is pulmonary and systemic pathways. So the pulmonary loop transports blood from the heart to the lungs and back, right? And we have the pulmonary artery, the pulmonary vein. So during this pulmonary loop, it's all about getting oxygen and dropping off CO2. So the role of the pulmonary loop is to take your low oxygen, high CO2 blood from the right side, go to the lungs, drop off CO2, pick up oxygen, and bring it back to the left side of your heart. Okay. And then the other loop is your systemic loop. So your systemic loop transports blood to the rest of your body. So the role of this loop is to take high oxygen blood, low CO2, drop that oxygen off in your body, drop it off to your cells, pick up CO2 and bring it back to your heart, where it can start all over again. So I'll draw a little example of that. Okay, so what's going to happen is we're going to go Vena Cava, Atrium. Actually, let me just switch up colors. So what we can do is usually when we have low oxygen blood, we do it in blue. Well, let's keep it dark blue here. So we do it in blue. So this is low oxygen blood. So it goes Vena Cava, atrium, ventricle, and then your pulmonary artery, right? And then it goes here, or it goes here. And then it picks up that oxygen. So I'm going to switch my color to red. It comes back into the pulmonary vein, right? And then it goes atrium, ventricle, and aorta. Okay, so this is what I drew right here. Let me do a different color. Maybe I'll do green. So this is my pulmonary loop. Right, pulmonary loop. I'll just go PL over there. So now you have all this oxygen-rich blood. So it needs to go to your head. And then when it goes to your head, it drops off all that oxygen, picks up CO2, and then we're back to blue here. And it goes back into your vena cava, right? And the other loop, so that's the superior loop. There's also an aorta exit out here, and it's going to go to your body, drop off all that oxygen, pick up CO2, and then it's going to come back through your inferior vena cava, right? So this is our, let me write that in green, oops. This is our systemic loop. Okay. So blood flow through your body. So there aren't just arteries and veins. There's actually other things. So arteries are blood vessels that transport blood away from your heart, right? With that exception being that coronary artery. But there's smaller arteries, kind of like there's like freeways, and then there's like main streets, which are called arterioles, and they're smaller arteries. And then there's veins, right? Blood vessels that transport it towards your heart, but there's smaller veins, which are venules. Okay. And then there needs to be a place where I switch from artery to vein, and those are called our capillaries. So these are tiny microscopic tubes that connect arteries to veins. So these capillaries need to be thin-walled, they need to be porous, and that's where gases and fluids are exchanged with the body's cells. Okay, so I'll show you some pictures of that. So here's our artery right here, right? And arteries, we'll find are very muscular. And then it goes from an artery into an arteriole, right? Which are just smaller arteries. And then this is our capillaries. Our capillaries, there's cells here, cells here, cells here, cells here. This is where they drop off their O2, pick up our CO2 between here, and then it goes into a venule, which is a smaller vein, into the veins like that. Okay. So this is just a picture of a capillary bed. So these are different cells here, and you can see they're wrapped around this blood where it switches from blue to red, right? So the arteriole is here. It goes into the capillary bed. It drops off CO2 and drops off O2 and picks up CO2 as it goes through there. Okay, and this picture looks very confusing, but it's just kind of putting it all together. These are showing the loops, right? So we go vena cava, we go atrium, and then ventricle, and then we go, this is our pulmonary loop to our lungs and back. Let me just switch the color so we can see that a little bit better, right? Vena cava, atrium, ventricle, pulmonary artery, lungs, pulmonary veins. That's my pulmonary loop, right? And then we go to our head, right? Artery, arteriole. This is my capillary bed through here. It drops off all the oxygen and comes back. And the same thing down below, right? We go down below and we go back up. So this is my systemic loop, and this is my pulmonary loop. So blood moves through the body because of pressure created from your heart beating. The closer your blood is to your heart, the more pressure it receives, which means that your arteries are much thicker than veins to withstand the pressure of your pumping heart, right? When it leaves, if we can see a heart here, right, it's always leaving out an artery. On this side is our artery, and then it comes back to the vein. Our aorta is an artery right here, and then it's leaving, and then this is like a one-way pass, so this is super far away from your heart, right? So veins have lower pressure, so valves are required to stop backflow of blood. So if I show you a picture of an artery and a vein, you'd be able to tell me which one is which. So arteries have a really muscular layer here, and then veins have a valve. So I'll show you another picture. Oh, no, that's the only picture that I have. Go back to this, right? So this picture I have here, this is a vein, it has a valve, and then this is much more muscular, so that's got to be an artery. So blood moves through one-way valves to prevent it from moving backwards. If a vein becomes stretched or damaged, blood can pool and you get a varicose vein. So this is when your valves aren't working properly. You get these varicose veins, which can be quite painful. Okay, give the assignment a try and let me know how it goes.